During the past 8 years, I have analyzed over 10,000 men and women who are earnestly seeking their proper niche in the world's work. Incidentally, through my work I have discovered some of the fundamental qualities without which no human being can hope for success. 5 of these are mentioned in this article. I have also discovered some of the things that break men's hearts and send them to the scrap heap of human failures. It is my sincere hope that every person who reads this article may profit by one or more of the points that it covers. I am placing the results of my discoveries in print solely out of my deep desire to make life's pathway just a little smoother for my fellow man. It is my purpose to pass on to you, in as few words as possible, that portion of my discoveries which I believe will aid you in planning and achieving your chief aim in life, whatever that may be. I shall not preach to you. Whatever suggestions I make are based upon discoveries that I have made in my work. I believe it befitting to state that 20 years ago I was working as a laborer, at wages of $1 a day. I had no home and no friends. I had but little education. My future then looked very unpromising. I was downcast in spirit. I had no ambition. I had no definite purpose in life. All around me I saw men, some young and some old, who were whipped, just as I felt that I was. I absorbed my environment as a sponge absorbs water. I became a part of the daily routine in which I lived. It had never occurred to me that I could ever amount to anything. I believed my lot in life was to be that of a laborer. I was just like a horse that has had the bit slipped into its mouth and the saddle buckled on its back. Here is the turning point in my career. Note it well. A chance remark, no doubt made in a half-jocular way, caused me to throw the bit out of my mouth, kick off the saddle, and run away as young horses sometimes do. That remark was made by a farmer with whom I lived. I shall never forget it if I live to be 100, because it has partly bridged the gap over that awful chasm which nearly all human beings want to cross: failure. The remark was this: "You are a bright boy. What a pity you are not in school instead of at work as a laborer at $1 a day. You are a bright boy." These were the sweetest words I have ever heard. That remark aroused in me the first ambition I had ever felt, and, incidentally, it is directly responsible for the personal analysis system that I have worked out. No one had ever hinted to me before that I was bright. I had always imagined I was exceedingly dull. In fact, I had been told that I was a dunce. As a boy I was defeated in everything I undertook, largely because those with whom I associated ridiculed me and discouraged me from engaging in the things that interested me most. My work was selected for me, my studies were selected for me, and my play, well, I was taught that play was a waste of time. With this first-hand knowledge of the great handicap under which the average person starts out in life as a work-ing basis, I began, many years ago, to work out a system for helping people find themselves as early in life as possible. My efforts have yielded splendid returns, for I have helped many find the work for which they were most suited, and I have started them on the road to happiness and success. I have helped more than a few to acquire the qualities for success that are mentioned in this article. The first 2 success requisites with this prelude, I shall tell you first what I believe to be the 2 most important of the 5 chief requisites for success. These are self-confidence and enthusiasm. The other 3 I will mention later. Fully 90% of those 10,000 people whom I have analyzed were lacking in these 2 qualities. I have analyzed men who were strong in both body and mind, men who were well educated, some of them college graduates, who were as helpless as I was the day the farmer made the remark, "You are a bright boy." My first task in advising people who lack self-confidence is to save them from themselves. Figuratively speaking, they must be taken out into the field and allowed to run away, just as a horse might do. They must discover their real strength. They must learn that their weakness exists nowhere except in their own deceptive imaginations. The manner in which I set people right in this respect must vary with each individual. The difference between the man who achieves success and the man who does not is not necessarily in brain capacity. More often the difference is in the use men make of their latent ability. I do not merely suspect that this is true. I know it is. I have gained this knowledge from actual experience in analyzing men. Usually the man who develops and uses all of his latent powers is a man who has plenty of self-confidence. What is self-confidence? I will tell you what it is. It is the little glass window through which you may look and see the real manpower within your body. Self-confidence is self-discovery, finding out who you are and what you can do. It is the banishment of fear. It is the acquirement of mental courage. It is the turning on of the light of human intelligence through the use of common sense. It was self-confidence, plus enthusiasm and concentration that caused the birth of the world's greatest inventions: the incandescent electric light, the automobile, the talking machine, the aeroplane, the moving picture, and all the other great mechanical creations. Self-confidence, then, is an essential quality for all worthwhile accomplishments. Yet, it is the quality in which most of us are weakest, not a weakness that many of us acknowledge, but it exists just the same. A man without self-confidence is like a ship without a rudder. He wastes his time without moving in the right direction. I wish I might be able to tell you exactly how to acquire full self-confidence. That would be a big undertaking. I will give you the suggestion, however. I made my first steps in the direction of self-confidence the day I first heard the words, "You are a bright boy." That was the first time I had ever felt ambition tugging at my coat sleeve, and with it, apparently, came self-confidence. One of my very close friends became a successful dentist after he had reached the age of 35 as a result of a remark made by his wife. He was examining his wife's false teeth when his wife said to him, "You could make a set of self-confidence, then, is an essential quality for all worthwhile accomplishments." Yet, it is the quality in which most of us are weakest, not a weakness that many of us acknowledge, but it exists just the same. A man without self-confidence is like a ship without a rudder. He wastes his time without moving in the right direction. I wish I might be able to tell you exactly how to acquire full self-confidence. That would be a big undertaking. I will give you the suggestion, however. I made my first steps in the direction of self-confidence the day I first heard the words, "You are a bright boy." That was the first time I had ever felt ambition tugging at my coat sleeve, and with it, apparently, came self-confidence. One of my very close friends became a successful dentist after he had reached the age of 35 as a result of a remark made by his wife. He was examining his wife's false teeth when his wife said to him, "You could make a set of not luxuries. They are a necessity to the man who comes in contact with the business public." These are just a few of the ways in which I know that people have made the first step toward acquiring self-confidence. I have noticed that there is no self-confidence without ambition. They go hand in hand. The second requisite for success is enthusiasm, that great dynamic force which puts self-confidence into action. Enthusiasm may be likened to the steam that runs the locomotive. The most powerful locomotive ever built might stand upon the sidetrack with coal in the bunker and the engineer in the cab, but if there is no steam, the wheels will not turn, there is no action. It is exactly the same with the human machine. If there is no enthusiasm, there is little or no action. Lack of these qualities, self-confidence and enthusiasm, stands between the great majority of men and success. This statement is no mere conjecture upon my part. I have proven it in thousands of cases. I am proving it in more than 100 cases a week today. Enthusiasm is something that cannot be counterfeited. Only the real article will fill the bill. Enthusiasm usually comes automatically when you find the vocation into which you can pitch your whole heart and soul, the work you love best. The third requisite for success is a definite working plan, the habit of working with a chief aim in life. From my work as a vocational director, I have learned that most people have no such plan. Men who are without a well-defined plan, without a predetermined objective, are going nowhere in particular, and most of them are getting nowhere. In my personal analysis chart, which all whom I examine must fill out, is this question: what is your chief aim in life? An actual tabulation of answers to this question shows that only 1 out of every 50 has any chief aim. But few have any sort of a real aim, chief or otherwise. Yet, nearly all whom I have analyzed expect to succeed. Just when, or how, or in what work, the majority of them do not undertake to say. A few weeks ago I stood and watched some men at work on a skyscraper. It was a massive building, towering far above the tops of the other buildings nearby. An elevator descended, took on a small steel beam, hoisted it into position, and the workmen soon made it a permanent part of that great building. Then this thought came to me: this building is only the sum total of brick, lumber, steel beams, and building materials, put together according to a definite plan. The same thought may be applied when we analyze men who are succeeding. The man who is holding a big position made that position for himself out of a number of smaller tasks well performed. Nearly every man wants a big position, yet not 1 out of 100, even though he may be competent, knows how to get it. A big position is not something that we find hanging on a bush ready to be plucked off through pull by the first person who comes along. It is the sum total of a number of smaller positions or tasks that we have efficiently filled, not necessarily with different firms, but, as often as otherwise, in the employment of one firm. A big position is built just as we build a big skyscraper, by first formulating a definite plan and then building according to that plan, step by step. The possible exception to this rule is the man who gets into a big position through pull. There are exceptions to most rules, but the question to ask yourself is this: am I willing to go through life and take a chance on getting ahead on pull? Look about you, and I dare say you will find that for every man who is succeeding by pull, you may find 100 who are succeeding by push. You will not achieve success without a definite goal with a definite plan to reach it. There are varying degrees of success, just as there are different ideas as to what success is, but whether your idea of success is the accumulation of wealth or the rendering of some great service to mankind or both, you will not likely achieve it unless you have a chief aim, a definite goal with a definite plan mapped out for reaching it. No architect ever started a building until he had first created a perfect picture of it in his mind and then carefully transferred the detail of the picture to a blueprint. And no human being may hope to build a worthwhile success until he has planned the building and decided what it shall be. I have found through my work as a vocational director that only 1 out of 100 has planned ahead and decided just what he will be doing a year in advance. Only 1 out of 1,000 has planned ahead for 5 years, and I have yet to find the first person who has planned ahead for 10 years. Do you wonder, then, why 95% of the people of the world are working for the other 5%? Do you wonder why so many men and women go through life without accumulating anything for old age? Have you ever stopped to wonder why it is that a few men get ahead while the great mass are failures? It will pay you to throw the spotlight on yourself and see how you measure up as to self-confidence, enthusiasm, and definite purpose or chief aim in life. Selecting a vocation, a very large proportion of the people whom I have analyzed are in positions that they hold, not by selection, but by chance. Even those who are following vocations that they deliberately chose, in the majority of cases, have not observed even the most elementary rules of self-analysis. They have never stopped to find out whether or not the work in which they are engaged is the work for which they are best fitted by nature and education. For example, a young man whom I recently analyzed had prepared himself for the practice of law but had made an utter failure of that profession. He failed, first, because he did not like the profession after he got into it, sec only, because he had absolutely no native ability for that profession. He was badly deformed physically and, as a consequence, made a very poor impression before courts and juries. He lacked enthusiasm and that dynamic force which we call personality, without which he could not hope to succeed as a lawyer. Such a person might succeed to some extent as an advisory counsel or office lawyer, but not as a trial lawyer, where a strong personality and the ability to speak with force and conviction count for so much. The surprising part of this particular case was the fact that this man had never understood just why he did not succeed in the practice of law. It seemed simple enough to him after I had pointed out the negative qualities that I believed had stood between him and success. When I asked him how he came to take up law, he replied, "Well, I just had a hunch that I would like it. I just had a hunch that I would like it." Selecting your life's work on a hunch is a dangerous thing. You wouldn't purchase a racehorse on a hunch. You would want to see him perform on the track. You wouldn't purchase a bird dog on a hunch. You would want to see him in action or know something of his pedigree. If you selected a bird dog in this haphazard way, you might find yourself trying to set birds with a bullpup. A court reporter whom I analyzed said to me, "My 15 years of experience have proven to me that a jury seldom tries the defendant, but instead, they try the lawyers in the case. The lawyer who makes the best impression generally wins." Everyone who is familiar with court actions knows that this is too often true. You can see, therefore, what an important part personality plays in the practice of law. My experience as a vocational director has convinced me that a very large number of business failures are due to the fact that men select partners and enter business projects on hunches. Men who would become competent engineers enter the grocery business, and vice versa. Men who probably would succeed in the grocery business go into engineering. The result in both cases usually is failure. Then another common mistake that men make is in selecting partners among their friends and those who are their exact counterparts in training, temperament, etc. A few years ago, 3 young men organized a corporation and went into business. They had all been successful executives in the employ of a corporation engaged in the same business that they entered for themselves. They had the necessary capital, but they made one fatal mistake. They failed to take into the firm a competent sales manager. These young men were excellent financiers, all of them, but they needed something more than financiers. They needed business. An ideal organization could have been made up by selecting one financial man, one competent sales manager, and one experienced buyer. Then, in selecting their help, they would have profited by employing men who would have brought to the firm some ability that the members themselves did not possess. Every firm ought to have men of opposite types, temperaments, and abilities. One type should correspond to the balance wheel, while the other should represent the generator. The composite of these two types would make an ideal organization. Mr. Carnegie says that his success is due largely to his ability to pick men. Mr. Frank A. Vanderlip and Mr. John D. Rockefeller say the same. If you will stop and analyze all successful men you will probably find that they either possess all the requisites for success in the business in which they are engaged, or they know how to select men who will supply what they lack, men who are their opposites in nearly every particular. Probably 50% of those who call themselves salesmen are of poor personal appearance, have weak faces, and speak without force. A salesman conveys to his prospective buyer a positive or negative influence according to his own personality and manner of approach in presenting his case. A man who is badly deformed, or the man who suffers from impediment of speech or otherwise makes a negative appearance, had better not take up oral salesmanship. If he can hide behind the written page, he may succeed, but in person, never. It is usually the minister's personal appearance and the manner in which he delivers his message that wins his followers. If you should read one of Billy Sunday's sermons before having heard him, you would wonder how he was able to sway thousands as he does. Without his pleasing personality and his remarkable and characteristic manner of delivery, his sermons would seem cold and undignified, if not actually repulsive. The fourth success requisite is the habit of performing more service than you are actually paid for. It is the practice of the majority of men to perform no more service than they feel they are being paid to perform. Fully 80% of all whom I have analyzed were suffering on account of this great mistake. You need have no fear of competition from the man who says, "I'm not paid to do that, therefore I'll not do it." He will never be a dangerous competitor for your job. But watch out for the fellow who does not let his pick hang in the air when the whistle blows, or the man who stays at his desk or workbench until his work is finished. Watch out that such a fellow does not challenge you at the post and pass you at the grandstand, as Andrew Carnegie said. Before mentioning the fifth and last requisite for success, I shall ask your indulgence while I digress for just a few moments. After I had commenced work on this article, I decided to have the 5 points which I am covering put to the acid test to see whether or not they would square up with the experience of other vocational directors. I took the manuscript to Dr. J. M. Fitzgerald of Chicago, who is probably the most able vocational director in the world. Dr. Fitzgerald went over the manuscript with me word for word, and I have his permission to quote him as saying that he fully endorses the 5 chief points covered by this article. He says that they square up with his own experience exactly. But before we went over the manuscript, I asked Dr. Fitzgerald to state the chief negative qualities that he had discovered to be standing as barriers between those whom he had analyzed and success. His reply was quick and concise, as follows: 1, 2, 3. Lack of self-discernment. The lack of ability upon the part of most men to analyze themselves and find the work for which they are best prepared. Lack of intensified concentration and the disposition not to put more into their work than they expect to get out of it. Lack of moral self-control. Dr. Fitzgerald has analyzed in person more than 15,000 men and women. Many of the largest corporations of the Midwest will not employ a man for any important position until he has been analyzed by Dr. Fitzgerald. He has taken men from the bookkeeper's desk and enabled them to become successful executives. He has converted clerks into managers in much less time than is ordinarily required, merely by having started them in the right direction through accurate personal analysis. I mention these details concerning Dr. Fitzgerald's work because I want you to feel that my own experience, as stated in this article, is not mere conjecture on my part, that it is authentic, and that it has the endorsement of the world's greatest personal analyst. Bear in mind that the 5 chief points covered by this article have been discovered, classified, and charted from the personal analysis of 25,000 people, 10,000 of whom I have analyzed and 15,000 of whom were analyzed by Dr. Fitzgerald. The fifth success requisite. This brings me to the fifth and last success requisite which I have discovered through my work as a vocational director. I have mentioned it before, and I shall mention it many times in the future because it is one of the most important of the 5 points covered in this article. The last success requisite is concentration. You might as well make up your mind right here and now that you must concentrate if you want to succeed in any undertaking. You may have all the knowledge you need for success in any undertaking. You may be a walking encyclopedia of information, you may be well educated, you may be experienced, but if you do not direct these energies systematically, they will be of little real use to either you or the world. We have a man here in the school who is a genius in many respects. He is a splendid carpenter. He is also one of the best electricians I ever saw. He is a splendid plumber. As an engineer, few can equal him. He is an artist with a paintbrush. He is a splendid decorator, and so on, ad infinitum, but the fact still remains that he is working for $18 a week. If he devoted all of his time to electrical work, he could easily command $30 a week or more. But he insists on having a hand in everything that comes along. His power to concentrate is nil.